You're listening to the Brenton On Tour Quarantine Cast. So far, he's taught you about good coffee.
Damn, Jimmy, this some serious gourmet shit.
Good music.
I'm like this, and then that becomes your thing. Music just does that.
And the secrets to good travel.
Exits. Okay, there's one back here. And there's probably one over by the wing somewhere.
Now, thanks to COVID-19, he's here to make sure that you're all good during this time of social distancing and self-isolation. So sit back and enjoy as he broadcasts from any number of exotic locations like Costa del Balconia, La Isla del Garage, Playa del Living Room, and the always magical Puerto Backyarda. And don't worry, he's already had the coronavirus and beat it. Still, maybe keep a mask handy. Here's BD.
Welcome everybody to the Brenton On Tour Quarantine Cast with my very special guest, Abby Simpson. How you doing?
Good, thanks. How are you?
How many podcasts have you done today?
This is 2 for today. Actually, that's the max I've had in one day so far. But
holy moly,
I have lost count of how many I've actually done, which is fine.
Abby Simpson, brand new blogger and contributor to DeanBlundell.com. Along for the ride now, joining a network of mostly men. So this is an interesting one for you to come in and start giving the female perspective. We've obviously also have Mercedes Nichol, 4-time Olympian, dropping in with her brand new podcast starting this week as well. So, the content's getting up there, but here you are. And so, Abby, I am in Vancouver with you. I'm up in out in the burbs in Cloverdale. Where are you? Downtown?
Yeah, I'm Falls Creek area.
Falls Creek. Oh, you got a great view. Falls Creek, for everyone not aware of your West Coast, is basically where the Olympic Village was. Yeah. And it's a beautiful place, right in the heart of
walkable.
Downtown Vancouver. Abby has been doing a shit ton of podcasts, mostly been on with Mancuso, but I know you did Dean's and a few other people. So welcome to the network. Let me formally and say hello and welcome and thanks for joining the team. It's awesome to have somebody who actually knows what they're doing on Twitter. Part of my world, because I'm still at, what am I at? 480 people. And I'm like, well, this is very exciting. And then you get someone with 20,000 and I'm always marveled at how that is able to even happen.
I'm the same, to be honest. I'm being honest. I marvel as well.
So you've probably been getting inundated with, I know you've been on with Chris's doing some political back and forth and all this kind of opinion stuff. Listen, I want to actually talk about the East versus the West, because we're both imports from the East. I'm from Oshawa, Port Perry, east of Toronto area. You are from where?
London, Ontario originally, and I lived for 2 years in Ottawa as well when I was about 20. So you're now, how long have you been in Vancouver for? I've been in Vancouver since I was 22. So it's been 13, about 13 years, I guess.
So I'm at 15 years. I just crossed over 15 years. So we're basically the same. So one of the things that there is abundantly clear, at least when I first moved here 15 years ago, it was the hatred of the West for the East.
Yes.
And I could never wrap my head around why that was. I was driving me crazy. Why does everyone hate Toronto so much? And when I refer to the East, I refer to Toronto, even though you're London and I'm Oshawa, they lump us into the same, right?
They do. Everyone, to this day, people are like, you're from Toronto, aren't you? And that's anywhere in the world.
Yeah, it's easy to start there and then go, oh, I'm East or I'm West or whatever it's going to be. So it's very interesting to kind of get everyone's perspective on it. So I initially blamed Hockey Night in Canada.
Okay. Yes.
Because from what I gathered from everybody, it was the Leafs every Saturday night and you can never get Canucks games on Saturdays. It was as simple as that, especially if you listen to like the Team 1040 or any of those guys. They hated anything Toronto because the Canucks could never get on Hockey Night in Canada on Saturday night.
Yeah.
And I was like, is it really that simple? Do the people in the West hate the East so much because of that simple fact?
No.
What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, I think as a political science, that's what my degree is in. I have a different perspective. It's not simply the hockey. It's not just that. It is, that's obviously part of it, but it has a lot to do with the history of the West, the prairie provinces, the Social Credit Party, a lot of that, and the differences between, Ontario and Quebec versus the natural resource giving prairie provinces back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. I think a lot of those feelings have sort of been inherited by future generations in BC, even if they don't quite know why Toronto thinks itself the center of the universe. They just sort of feel as though the attention is always on Ontario or Quebec, but primarily Ontario.
Were you offended by it when you first moved here? Because I initially was offended by it, and then just because I was like, what the fuck is everyone's problem? But then I was like, then I moved away from that and was like, well, no one from Vancouver is from Vancouver. So,
and that's the thing, right? When I first moved out here, I thought it was a little bit funny because so many Ontarians can't wait to get out to BC, to the mountains and the ocean and everything, right? So, so many Ontarians do kind of come west, whether for part of their life or permanently. So I didn't quite understand how there was this like crazy hatred for Ontario. Also growing up in Ontario, you don't get the perspective of animosity towards a place that thinks itself the center of the universe because you're in it, if you will.
You really don't.
Exactly.
And even now when I talk to people back, east home, especially in small towns and stuff, it's like, oh yeah, you guys in the West, you hippies in the West. I'm like, well, I used to be East. Yeah. But I don't, people drive John Deere tractors out here as well,
They do. Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Not down here in Falls Creek, but.
No, but out in Cloverdale where I am, there's a full goddamn rodeo. So people need to chill out a little bit on that, on that side of it. What about this? Okay. So, Ontario had Quebec wants to separate. So they're like, let him go. The other perspective that I got about the East versus West was that if British Columbia and Alberta separated from Canada, which was a big thing and a bit of a chat I learned for a while, they would be one of the richest countries in the world. And coinciding with that, there was the rumor that Alberta and BC sent all their money to the rest of the country to help their individual deficits, which has also made people pretty pissed off in the West about having to supplement the rest of the country. What do you think about that?
Oh yeah, no. And I think that those go part and parcel. So again, with where I was saying, like a lot of political arguments have a lot to do with that animosity, which of course people in Ontario, they're not feeling. Toronto doesn't think itself the center of the universe. It'll look at a place like New York and think it's the center of the universe. And they don't look at a place like Alberta or BC with resentment about the fact that they've got any resources but yet all of the business connected to those resources is pretty much centered on Bay Street, right? So I look at it from both perspectives that there is definitely aspects of these businesses that require both locations to cooperate. But I also think living in Vancouver now, the BC and Alberta separation argument has given way to a Cascadia argument instead.
Interesting. What's your take on it? What do you think?
What do I think of Cascadia?
Yeah.
I'm really patriotic as a Canadian, and I would prefer to keep Canada together. I love the idea of California, Oregon, and Washington joining with us as a kind of Cascadia arm of the rest of Canada, personally. But if Cascadia was ever a thing, and if I was still living here, I would go with it.
Do you still, what is your feeling on living here now? I have, friends back home that will often say, oh, when you're done with that West Coast thing, we'll see you when you come back or whatever it is. And I don't think anyone understands that when you come out here and you take it all in, that you're really not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Once I'm here and I'm here.
Finances would be the thing that would drive me away. right? Because it's an extremely expensive city to live in. So that would be the one thing that I've seen drive anybody back to Ontario is expenses.
Yeah.
But I definitely would miss the mountains so much. Growing up in Ontario, you don't know what you're missing until you kind of lived in a place where you can be on the top of a mountain and, with your feet in the ocean on the beach in the same day. Right.
Yeah, I love that. And especially right now, considering you hear about people on top of each other in New York City and Toronto, and people are losing their minds. I mean, you can only go to Lake Ontario or up to Haliburton or up to Muskokas, but it's still freezing. And here we have, we're never more than an hour away. No matter where you are, you're in False Creek, you can be in the mountains in 35 minutes from where you are. I can go the other way. I can be in Chilliwack. I can go up to Maple Ridge into Golden Ears Park. I got all these really cool locations around me that I can be. Plus I have White Rock, which is the ocean and the tide's out. So we have all these really great abilities to escape to the outdoors here, which I think has really helped this province get through the COVID thing.
I hope so. I mean, I've tended to stay inside just a little bit, being so close to downtown.
Yeah.
And I don't actually have a vehicle, so then you're getting on transit and you're risking exposure and things like that. So I've tended to stick inside the couple times that I have gone out to the seawall. It's been a little crowded for me, even.
Yeah.
So it's because you just don't know, right? You don't know what to expect, and you could go out and run into 7 people and be absolutely fine. And so it's just because there's so many questions in the air right now that I have sort of been staring out my window a little bit.
How do you think, and I don't get too political on this thing because there's people way smarter than me that get into that, including yourself, but I do have a question about how do you think our provincial government is handling this?
I think they're doing really well. I like that John Horgan has pretty much made Dr. Bonnie Henry the health minister front and center for all of this. That is really important to me.
I think she should be prime minister, actually.
Well, there you go, right? And then she's done a really good job, and she is being honest. There's not, if they don't know something about COVID, they're
nobody can get angry at her. You understand? If she goes out there as the prime minister and says, like, everyone's up in arms about Trudeau today and the guns and all the rest of it, and they're just pissed off because he really separates the right and the left. If she were to go up there and say the same thing, people would be like, "Well, okay, well, that's nice." That's the vibe that I get from her. She's like, okay, because she's also like that aunt that you might have, or neighbor that's like, she's really nice all the time, but the minute she gets pissed off, you're like, it's over. Whatever she says.
I also like to think that we're listening to her because she's an actual doctor.
I know. She's amazing. She's great. She's so great. And I think people forget about that. They see Dr. Bonnie and they see the doctor this and the doctor that. And I think people need to remember that, that's real.
That is. Yeah.
It's real.
It is. 100%.
And I think we just got lucky. I think we've got the best one of all of all the ones. So it's kind of cool. What's your take on, just overall living here in Vancouver as a whole? I mean, I absolutely love it here. I know that you're a Leaf fan like me, that came over and all the rest of it, and had to deal with all the anarchy of that. My first Leaf game, I attended when did I move here? I mean, I moved here in 2005. So I think it was February. I think it was the following season, in October, I went and saw a Leaf Canucks game. Yeah. And all the Leaf fans blocked the 3rd level washrooms. So none of the Canuck fans could come in and go to the washroom. And it was really, really, really funny. It was one of the funniest things I'd ever seen, because if you've ever you've gone to a Leaf game and Leaf and Canucks at Rogers, or no?
I've done one Leafs Canucks game at Rogers Arena. The Leafs lost that game like 6-0 or something like that. Like, it was bad. This was pre-Matthews, pre-Marner, pre-Anderson. It was Reimer was still their goalie. And I just remember the game obviously stank. And I ended up behind this drunk Canucks fan who was just chanting Reimer.
I think I heard you tell that story. Yeah.
So
it was so funny.
For me, was kind of a bummer on the day. I love going to Leafs games, but I also have nothing against the Canucks, especially in that era. They were really very good. And it was fun to watch them. So I'm a big Canucks fan, except when they are playing the Leafs, apparently.
Same with me. I'm exactly the same. The Canucks are always number 2 for me. So when I moved out here, I got you by a couple of years. So when I moved out here, they actually just got rid of everybody that I used to hate on the Canucks. So we actually had the rise of Kessler, the rise of the Sedins. Luongo came in, Burrows, Bieksa, all these great guys. And then we've got the Stanley Cup run and we got the Olympics. I mean, it was a great time to be in Vancouver after 2005. The city was exploding. And I think this is a controversial thing to say to a lot of people. I'm sure Mancuso would definitely rake me over the coals over this. But is it okay to like 2 teams?
Yeah, I think absolutely it is. This,
I'm a Leafs fan first. Leafs versus Canucks. It's always Leafs over Canucks all day. I'll go to the game in a Leaf jersey, all the rest of it. But the rest of the time, when I'm not getting Leafs games, we got to watch hockey somehow, right?
For sure. Yeah. I think if you're a fan of the game of hockey, like what you like, it doesn't bother me at all if people have more than one team that they're a fan of. For sure, for me, I know that there's no team tied with the Leafs. Would there be a team tied with the Canucks? Maybe.
Right. Right.
I have I'm always, anytime there are Canadian teams in the playoffs. I have nothing against the Habs either.
Well, you also lived in Ottawa for a while too, and you had to deal with all that. So I'm sure you became a Sens fan too.
The thing. Actually, I'm not a Sens fan. That's the thing. When I'm a fan of every Canadian team except them, because I lived in Ottawa for 2 years, and I just sort of, the vibe that I always kind of got from Sens fans was that they spent so much time talking about the Leafs and never any time talking about the Sens.
Sure.
So it was just this kind of their complex against the Leafs was so intense that it just impacted upon my feeling about the team. Plus now the team is managed so horrifically that it's just a trash fire you can't help but enjoy a little bit. I was in Australia actually during the Sens Cup run when they played the Ducks. What was that, 2007? And I was the only Canadian at this bar called Cheers in Sydney that was open at 10 a.m. and was the only bar that we were aware of that was doing live Stanley Cup final games. So my friend and I are going to this bar basically every other day and getting sloshed at 10 a.m. Well, I am, not my friend. And
it's 5 o'clock somewhere.
I mean, the only people in the place are Canadians, of course, and friends of Canadians that live in Australia. And I'm the only Canadian in the bar that's cheering for the Ducks. So,
well, all the Canadians were on the team, so that's why.
Wow. That's
why. And I think people get that. So it's funny when you get people when the playoffs solidify who's playing who, people go, well, who, here it's where are the most Canadians? Oh, they're on Anaheim. Yeah. Okay, we're gonna cheer for that.
I still for every fan base in Canada, except for the Sens fan base, I guess, I would love them to celebrate a Stanley Cup victory. I think it would be such a great thing for them and their city, and it'd just be so fun to obviously I would rather be a part of it with it being the Leafs, but for me it would just be a really fun thing to watch and hope as well that they do it responsibly and they don't set cars on fire like the Habs fans did in 93 or the Canucks fans did when they lost.
That must have been guys. I think it was guys from Surrey where I live, unfortunately.
Wow. It was so many people because it was just that herd mentality. And I was downtown for that game actually. Yeah. And they were already losing 3-0 by the end of the second period. And I just had that feeling of this is not going to go well. Tim Thomas is way too hot. There's no way he's going to let in 4 goals in the next 20 minutes. So my issue with that whole thing was, and it sounds like we're going over the Doug Gilmour high stick thing with Gretzky, but I really thought they should have started Schneider in Game 3 in Boston
And I was, people at the time were all over me about it, going, well, you got to run with the goalie that's hot. I'm like, yeah, but the goalie that's hot never wins in Boston.
Yeah.
And, Schneider killed them when they went back for the next game. Anyway, Schneider was great. They were the Jennings winners. They were like 1-2. I'm like, just what do you got to lose? You're up 2-0. Throw Schneider in. If you lose, you go back to Luongo. But I really thought that they made a mistake there, and I think honestly, I think it cost him the cup. Personally, I think it cost him the cup because I think that losing that game, not that they were going to win 3 in a row, but one of those Boston games he should have went in. And so that was an issue for me.
Absolutely. I think, but
interestingly
with the riots the next day or that night, right? So I had left downtown and I got home. I walked because the SkyTrain was packed, but I got home just in time to flip the news on, and they were like, "Yep, game is over. They lost, and now there's a car on fire."
Yeah. I was in Ontario. I was in a bar in Port Perry with my friends, and I was actually in the bar hanging out, and then that happened, and I remember all my buddies that I was with were like, "Oh, look at your city,"
Yeah.
And
well, that's it. That's the thing. Like I felt I had lived in Vancouver at that point for, what was it? Almost 3 years or more, 3 years or more. And the riots and the destruction for nothing. And the next day when everybody came out sort of to clean up downtown, that was the moment where it felt like Vancouver is my city. I had felt like a visitor kind of, or a transplant and an East Coaster living on the left coast. I had felt like that until that moment. That was the moment where I sort of felt like this had happened to my city, and I was angry because it was garbage.
How long were you in, I'll let you go soon. How long were you in Ottawa for? Is that where you went to school and did political science? Yeah.
I didn't do political science in Ottawa. I ended up I have a diploma in public relations from Algonquin College.
Okay.
And so I went to Algonquin College for 2 years. And after I finished up there, got the diploma, I left right away. Ottawa just didn't strike me as a city I wanted to spend a longer time in. It was freezing in the winter. And it was like worse than London by so much. So the temperature, I remember vividly one day I worked in radio promotions and I had to get up at like 6 a.m. to go for an early morning movie premiere at a theater for a kids film. So the premiere was at like 10 in the morning, and I get to the station, which didn't have underground or covered parking. And the back parking lot, the vehicle that I'm supposed to take is covered, the entire shell of the vehicle is covered in 1.5 inches of ice all the way around.
I have, and Ottawa is freezing. I have friends there, and they, it's very interesting to me. They've been struggling with dating in Ottawa because it's such a political city. And I would imagine this would be in Washington. I would imagine this would be in anything of a capital or anything like that. But I am curious, not to get too far into your personal life or anything like that, but dating in Ottawa at the time, which I know was a few years ago, versus dating in Vancouver. And I've been told, interestingly enough, two sides of it, because I know somebody that was in Ottawa dating and then moved to Vancouver for a while and was dating and then went back to Toronto and went through this whole thing. And the difference between the two sides of the country are very interesting, because in Ottawa specifically, it's so many political people. So almost every single person you're dating is either a lawyer or somebody that is, got some kind of political gig. And it's just a disaster because it's just a terrible city to try to date somebody in. And out in Vancouver, no one from Vancouver is from here. So dating either somebody, the few people that are from Vancouver it's different than somebody that's traveled here from another part of the country and they don't want to settle down. And so it's just a nightmare between the two. And I'm going to get your take on it,
Well, I mean, I was just 20 years old.
Sure.
And I did have a boyfriend in Ottawa. I didn't have, I guess, trouble finding him, if you will.
Sure.
And it is definitely, I think, harder to date in Vancouver. The thing that I find so common is the guy that is all about a relationship, and then all of a sudden he's not. And
That's in Vancouver, or is that everywhere?
well, it could be everywhere. Yeah.
Right. Right.
That's just the thing that I have found. I find it's also really tough to meet people in Vancouver. People don't just like walk up to strangers.
Well, that's what I heard. And I am curious about the East versus West, because it's kind of jammed down your throat in the East about like just a little bit more. I just noticed it.
The thing is I ended up, the guy that I dated in Ottawa, I met him through work. Right. So, it's not like we met randomly at a bar or anything like that. I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily be able to properly compare the two, because I only had that kind of one serious boyfriend while I was in Ottawa. And it's been 13 years here of, dating, and whether I'm dating a guy from here or not, dating is hard everywhere. It's hard everywhere. I'm happy that I don't have to do it anymore. And I got kind of lucky when I moved here, because I sort of had met my wife within a couple of weeks of actually being out here. So I got a little bit lucky on that side. But there's no shortage of East versus West battles. I wrote an article about it on Dean Blundell a little while ago, which was fun. It got a lot of traction. People were all over me about it. The biggest takeaway from you, I love our country as well, so I don't hate anywhere. I've been everywhere. I've been across the country 50 plus times. I've been to almost every single city, and I love them all, and they all have their own little charm. But let me know, what do you love the most about living out here? And then tell me what's next for Miss Abby here. Well, what I love most about living out here is the hiking trails, really, the nature, the fact that there's never really any need to shovel a ton of snow, maybe once. Never. And so that's really nice. I'm not ruining a ton of pants and boots with salted sidewalks all the time.
For sure.
But it is still Canada in the end. But I do like to tell people that when I travel overseas, and it's not like I'm excited to tell people this, but when I travel overseas and people are like, "Oh, you're Canadian," and they're like, "Where are you from?" And I say Vancouver, and they're like, "Oh, I was in Vancouver. It was the nicest place I've ever been." And I was just like, if you think Vancouver's nice, then you need to get to the rest of Canada, because it is my opinion that Vancouver's the least friendly city that I've spent.
Least friendly. Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
But I mean, and that's nothing, like, whatever. It's not like Vancouver is an actually unfriendly city. It's just the least friendly.
I think it really comes back to the fact that so many people are not from the actual province. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people move here to get away from stuff, or they're just starting over. I moved out here to start over. There's all this kind of stuff where it's like, well, they're just a little bit more cautious of who they let into their life, instead of being able to walk down the street to somebody's house and walk in and get some milk from the fridge and walk out and leave a beer and a note. That just doesn't happen here. It's just it's a different vibe. But I can tell you, traveling around the world, people ask me where my favorite parts of the world is. And Vancouver's always in the top 5 for me as far as the world. Mm-hmm. People travel here to come to our mountains, come to ski, all the rest of it. So it's very interesting. But I was very curious to get you on because, hey, you're Eastern or Western Ontario, and I was Eastern Ontario, and they're almost the same basically when it comes to it. So we would have gone through similar journeys. The fact that we're only about 2 years removed from coming out here, we're both Leaf fans.
We're both off the 401, aren't we?
That's right. We're both off the 401. We're both off the 401. You've got that great McDonald's stop in Cambridge on the way to London. You've got all that. It's all that. I have a whole story about getting a Big Mac bought for me by Holly McNarlin there. It's interesting.
Really?
Long time ago when my career started. That's for another day. But East versus West, Vancouver versus Toronto. As long as Canada's all together, that's all that matters to me. But it is certainly fun to chat about the differences that we've had to experience together going through this. And I really appreciate your time today. It's awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm glad we could get it together.
Yeah, what's next for you? You're blogging away, and tell people where they can find you online and what you're what they can expect from you, because your Twitter is on fire.
Well, it is Abby the Tweet on Twitter, ABBYTHETWEET. That's primarily where I hang out online. I have a blog as well that you can reach by going to the Twitter page. And you can reach the blogs that I do for deanblundell.com there as well. And that's really what you can expect from me at this point. I'm always working on fictional stories. There's an anthology in the pipeline that I don't really have a ton of details on at the moment, but one of my stories should be featured in that. And
lots going on.
And hustling.
Well, we're happy to have you on the network. I was happy to have you on the show, and I really appreciate you making the time today. Fellow Leaf fan,
Woo,
Abby Simpson, Abby the Tweet, and hopefully we can do this again down the road.
Definitely. All right. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, buddy.
All right, bye.